right, welcome everybody. It is time to get this online town hall started. I will be your host tonight. My name is John Anderson. I am Director of Media for Nebraska Firearms Owners Association. And real quick here, we'll just say hello to our fellow guests tonight. We've got our president, our fearless leader, is driving home from a previous engagement, which I kind of figured would be the case, that would go a little bit later, and that's okay. Trish, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. NFOA never sleeps, and so I've been spending the latter half of the day with a well-known congressman discussing what's going on at the federal level and making plans for how we can address that at the local level. So it was well worth my time. But of course, things back up, and so here I am driving, and I will be more visible as soon as I get to the house.
That's all right. Safety first. Focus on the drive home, and we'll cover for you while you're focusing on that. So
that's right.
We don't want anybody having any accidents for sure. All right, and also on the screen with me is one of our longtime volunteers, former board member himself. We've got Dick Clark with us, and rather than me muff this all up, I will just let you give your list of credentials. As far as not only being an attorney at law, but also the other things that you do, both with NFOA and with the legislature.
Sure. So I am an attorney based out of Lincoln, and I work in a private law practice, which is where I'm sitting right now, Dick Clark Law, which focuses primarily on firearms law, use of force and self-defense, and a few other things. And then I also work with the Nebraska legislature as a committee legal counsel and have the opportunity to serve in the government committee under Chairman Tom Brewer, who, as many of you know, is probably the most outstanding advocate for the right to keep and bear arms in the legislature, and certainly a fair hand with the rifle himself. So that's who I am.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight and giving us some of your very valuable time. And just a quick disclaimer: Dick is he's playing hurt tonight. He's getting over kind of a head cold, some congestion. So please bear with him if he needs to stop and clear his throat so his voice stays with us all night. We will do our best to help field questions as well, so that we can take some of the pressure off of his voice tonight. So real quick, a couple things that we want to mention before we get started. As always, we are always hoping that if you're listening to this and watching us, that you are a member of NFOA, and if you're not, we would invite you to join. It is free to join. It'll always be free. We will never charge you any kind of membership dues. And as volunteers, that's what we get paid out of, is that $0 that you spend. We just want you to know, not to pat ourselves on the back, as I always say. The reason that I stress that is because we want you to understand that everybody who is associated with this organization is doing it because we believe in what we are saying, and right, nobody's getting paid to do any of this. So we appreciate all of our membership. We'll never ask you to donate or to pay anything to be a membership. That doesn't mean we'll turn it down. Anybody who wants to donate to the cause, absolutely, we will accept that. But you can visit nebraskafirearms.org and become a member there. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at info@nebraskafirearms.org as well, so you can get a hold of us right there on the website. Or if you're watching this tonight, we really want you to interact. We want your comments, your questions. So on YouTube or Facebook, either way, please go ahead and take advantage of that live chat feature. It should be right down below where you're seeing us, depending on the device you're using. It could be off to the side, but get in that live chat. Number one, just say hi. We want to know where you are, so that we kind of get an idea where these go and how far we reach. But also, we want to know what's weighing on your mind, and the questions that pertain to the topics we're discussing. We will try and field as many of those as we can. That's why we do this live and we do these online town halls, because we could build this in a video and just record Dick saying all of this and just post it out there. But if you have questions, you have to wait to get those answered. You have to know how to get in touch with us. Whereas you can just ask right now. We'll do our best to field any and all of those. The other thing that we would ask you to do is please like the page on Facebook or subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and just hit that share button and let everybody know that we're doing this live. And this is accessible forever, as long as YouTube and Facebook say that we can still have our pages. These will be available to go back and watch on replay. So everybody that you share this with, if they don't catch it live, they can sure watch this after the fact, and you can come back and reference this as often as you'd like as well. So with all that said, a couple things that we want to get into. We get all these questions, and as the primary people who field the questions on our Facebook page, Trish and I usually see these before anybody else does, comments as well. But a lot of you out there have all these questions like, when LB 236 got changed and converted over to the omnibus bill, why didn't we put in a bill right then and there and try to pass statewide permitless concealed carry? A lot of people want to know how we get these bills passed, or why we haven't done some of these things. So we wanted to revisit and just kind of go back to basics first of all, because I have to admit, before I was a board member, I was very unaware of the process. That's the term I'll use. There are a lot of things that I just didn't remember from my high school civics classes, especially about our unicameral government. And so Dick is here to kind of just first and foremost explain the process of introducing a bill and then pushing that bill on through the legislative process up until it becomes signed by the governor into law, and what can happen as far as pitfalls to some of these bills, why some of them go nowhere. So with that, on that part of it, Dick, I'll turn the floor over to you.
All right, thanks, John. And your warning is for good reason. Everybody might get to witness a lawyer not being as talkative, and maybe that's a blessing. I don't know. We'll see. But I did want to just kind of give a quick refresher to everybody about how a bill finds its way through the legislative process in Nebraska. I've had the opportunity to work around that process since the first session that I was involved with, which was in 2011. And so 2021 is the 11th legislative session that I've been involved with in a pretty active way. Most of those from inside the building. I used to work in the governor's policy research office, which is almost sort of the lobbying shop for the governor inside the Capitol, going out and contacting senators, letting them know where the governor's at on things, helping where we want to help, maybe trying to play a little defense where we want to play defense. And now I work in the legislative branch, which is obviously the branch of government that actually gets to vote on bills. And the governor, of course, just gets that ability to either sign something into law or to veto it. So the legislative process starts actually where we're at right now on the calendar, which is the drafting phase. Okay, the Nebraska legislature is part-time. During odd-numbered years, we get 90 legislative days because we have to craft a biennial budget. And then during the even-numbered years, we only get 60 days because there isn't as much budget work to be done. There's some mid-biennium adjustments, but you mostly have that budget you created the last year. And so they give you only 60 days instead of 90 because the folks drafting the Nebraska Constitution thought maybe the legislature would get up to trouble otherwise. And that's not too far from the truth, maybe. So the phase we're at right now, we are in the interim in between regular sessions. We did just have a special session related to redistricting, which is required every 10 years, the year after the federal census is completed. And we had to do it as a special session because the census numbers were so late. They're actually required by federal law to be delivered by the beginning of April, and they were not delivered until the middle of August to the states. And so had to call a special session because our regular session ended, end of May this year. So the phase we're in right now is we're all drafting bills or trying to nail down what bill ideas our particular senator may want to turn into bills that he's going to introduce in the coming year, or that she's going to introduce in the coming year. And so a lot of that comes from hearing from constituents. A lot of it is follow-up on previous projects that maybe were left undone or where we didn't get everything done we wanted, and so we want to go back. And a lot of it just comes from things we've learned in that previous cycle. And so part of that drafting process is determining, hey, is my senator going to carry a bill, or are we going to try to shop this around? How many co-sponsors do we think that we can line up ahead of time? A lot of times that's a barometer senators will use to gauge how likely a bill is to be successful. Hey, how many of my colleagues are excited about being a part of this project? And so really that's happening right now. In January, we will start the regular session for 2022. And that'll be in early January. And we get 10 days, only 10 days, to introduce bills. Okay. Now, there are a couple of exceptions, but basically any bill that would be related to what we're talking about, firearms bills, are going to have to be introduced sometime in that first 10-day period. And really, it's days 2 through 10. The first day, really nobody introduces bills because they're having to adopt legislative rules and so on. So once a bill is introduced, dropped into the clerk's basket, then there has to be a hearing scheduled in front of the committee that has jurisdiction over that issue. Usually, bills that are about firearms policy are going to go to the Judiciary Committee. Sometimes they go elsewhere if it is determined that really it's more about another topic and maybe the gun policy issue is ancillary. For example, the county constitutional carry idea that Senator Brewer proposed earlier this year went to government committee because it was really about granting a new power to local government, to county governments, rather than changing the substantive gun policy at the state level, right? We weren't going to change constitutional carry anywhere. We were going to give counties the power to change it. So that came to government committee. Every bill is going to get scheduled for a hearing, but it may be a really early hearing, which is advantageous because it gives you more time on the clock after that stage, or it could be a really late hearing. Now, sometimes a hearing might be late because there's a lot of preparation that still has to be done for that hearing. And sometimes an introducer will request a little bit later of a hearing. But usually early is good, late is a little bit tougher. So you get at least 1 week's notice when a hearing is going to be held. The public notice has to go out at least a week in advance. Often it's earlier than that, especially with Judiciary Committee. They get so many bills. Their clerk, Lori Vollertson, is actually really good at getting the schedule done early. As soon as she's got all the bills referred to her, she gets them on the calendar pretty quick. And so we'll probably know more than a week in advance when bills that we care about are coming up for hearing. Now, at the hearing, committees are going to hear in-person testimony, but they are also going to consider letters that have been submitted either to individual senators or to the committee for the record. And now we have a feature as of last year for website comments. And so you can actually post comments in favor or opposition or neutral in relating to a particular bill. Those are not part of the official record, but I can tell you senators do look at that. And so at that hearing, everybody's going to say their piece. Now, sometimes in the past with gun bills, we've had so many people show up, which is awesome, by the way, but we've had so many that, especially Chairman Lathrop, who rides pretty tight on the committee hearings, he will often limit the amount of time of testimony on each bill in order to get done with work at a reasonable hour in his estimation. And so showing up is great, even if you don't get to testify, though. It really shows that people are engaged, that care, and they're coming out to participate in the process. And I think that sends a really powerful and positive message. Now, once the committee hearing is done, we don't know what's going to happen yet, right? Because what has to happen next is the committee has to hold an executive session on the bill. Now, sometimes a bill may never get an executive session. It's really at the discretion of the chair of the committee to either schedule it for an executive session or in some cases just to allow a motion on a bill. And different chairs have different rules for their committee. In the government committee, Chairman Brewer is going to find that a motion on a bill is out of order if that bill is not on his agenda. Okay. In other committees, it works a little differently. But in any case, if the committee takes action. It can be by a simple majority of the committee to either indefinitely postpone the bill, basically kill the bill, or they can advance it to general file, which is the first round of debate before the whole legislature. So again, it's only a simple majority of the committee that is required to get that to advance to general file. But if you don't have the chairman on board, you may never get a chance to find out if there's a majority of the committee for it. Now, the alternative, if you can't get it out of committee by a vote of the committee, there is a sort of nuclear option where you can do what's called a pull motion. That's where a motion can be introduced on the floor of the legislature to override the committee and to pull a bill from that committee and place it on general file, even though the committee hasn't done that itself. Okay. It is unusual. It only happens maybe once a year that there will be a successful pull motion. Often it's not even once a year. It only requires 25 votes, but there's a whole lot of inertia working against you because committee chairs don't like it when you do this and sort of override their authority. They're very jealous to protect that authority. And so they will make all these arguments about process and tradition and so on to try to stop those pull motions. Whether it's a committee vote or a pull motion, once a bill gets placed on general file, which is the first round of floor debate, we're still not out of the woods yet. There still has to be some way to get it on the agenda. Okay. The agenda is what the speaker creates for every legislative day, and that shows the things that can be discussed that day on the floor of the legislature, and it shows the order that they'll be discussed. So there are a couple of ways to get on the agenda because there are lots of bills, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of bills introduced every session. Many of them will never see the light of day, and many that even make it to general file will not ever get on a floor agenda because they're just crowded out. So if you can get an early hearing, get that bill advanced early, then you're early in what's called worksheet order. So you're just, chronologically early in the order based on when it came out of committee, when it became available for the speaker to place on a floor agenda. And then a common approach is just prioritizing the bill. And what that is, there are rules that allow individual legislators and allow committees to sort of put some extra gas on certain bills. Okay. And that's called a priority designation. Individual senators get one priority bill each per year. And then committees get two priority bills each. And so a priority designation basically guarantees that your bill is going to get debated on the floor. It all but guarantees it. That really, when the speaker accepts that priority designation, he's really committing that that's going to happen. He's going to place it on one of his agendas. And so LB 236 this year, just as an example, was a priority bill of Senator Clements. And that is what guaranteed that we'd get to the floor, even though there were some, timing issues on when we got it out of committee. And we'll talk about more about that in a minute. But anyway, once you get on the agenda, a simple majority of 25 is all that's required to pass most bills. However, if there is a filibuster, people just endlessly speaking in order to delay the vote, a motion to stop debate and take a vote, a cloture motion to end that filibuster, takes a supermajority. It takes 2/3 or 33 votes out of the 49 in order to stop debate and force a vote on a bill. So that is quite a hurdle, okay? Because there are really not 33 senators all alike. There's not even really 10 all alike. That there's coalitions that have to be built. And so getting to 33 on any controversial bill is a tall order. It's a tough thing to do. Now, along with just having to have the supermajority numerically, cloture, meaning ending a filibuster, also requires that you go the distance on the debate. And that is a different duration for each stage of debate. General file has the longest period of time. It's currently 8 hours. Select file is less time. Final reading is less time than that before a cloture motion will be ruled in order. But you have to do a cloture motion each time if the filibuster continues. And then finally, if it passes on final reading, again, just requires a simple majority for most bills that don't have an emergency clause. But if it gets whatever the requisite vote is to be put on the governor's desk, then the governor has a certain amount of time to take action, whether that's signing the bill into law or or vetoing the bill. If the governor vetoes the bill, the legislature does have the ability to come back with a three-fifths majority, 30 votes, to override his veto. And that does happen sometimes. It's not very common, but it happens maybe once or twice a year. And at the end of the legislative calendar, you will typically see this big gap between the next to the last day of session and the last day. And that is in case there are any vetoes where there is a motion to make the bill law notwithstanding the objection of the governor, or what's called a veto override. So that is how a bill becomes a law process in a nutshell. I mean, at that point, it's just a matter of waiting for a certain amount of time to pass after the end of the legislative session for the bill to become effective. And also, if it has an emergency clause, it can actually become effective immediately or sooner than that designated period of a couple of months. So that's the process in a nutshell. I know that a lot of you have questions about redistricting, which, as I mentioned, was what we just had a special session for. I kind of explained why we had to have a special session for that. And that was just because of when we got the census numbers, made it impossible to do it in the regular session, like we did in 2011, by the way. We did it in the regular session then. But what happened in redistricting is pretty simple.
Dick, let me stop you right there real quick. Well, first of all, let's give Dick's voice a rest, and we'll give you a chance if you need to grab a drink or anything. Let's go back here to, there we go. We'll go back to the multi view on the screen here. First and foremost, those of you who are out there watching, if you have any questions as far as getting a bill introduced, getting a bill passed, anything you weren't clear on from the things that Dick has already told us, please feel free to drop those questions in the live chat. We want to answer those questions for you. That's why we're here. And so we want to get that going. And I've got a couple questions. And again, some of this is going to be a little bit of recap, but again, Dick, for introducing a bill, I mean, we've got very limited time on when the bill can actually be introduced into the legislature. So can you go back over that real quick? Just why don't we throw something back in the legislature midsummer or something like that?
Well, so first of all, in the summer, there wouldn't be a legislature to take action on it because they're recessed for interim. But again, you can only introduce a new bill in the first 10 days of the session. And so it's just not allowed under the rules to introduce a bill after that time. Now, the other thing is, let's say you wanted to really radically amend a bill. You're not going to introduce a new bill. You're just going to gut it and put a bunch of new stuff in it. Technically, that new material, if it hasn't had a hearing before, is going to have to get a hearing. And in the past couple of years, we've had a handful of times where we had to go back and have a late committee hearing that wasn't previously on our radar, but we had to schedule one because an amendment so greatly changed a bill that we had to notice that, give people a chance to comment on it, because in Nebraska, we take very seriously the idea that the public is supposed to be able to participate in the process and not have a hearing on one bill and then have a radically different bill that never gets a hearing, but that becomes law, right? And so in the case, in the case of LB 236, we could have probably amended the bill. I mean, we could have introduced an amendment to change it to being just a statewide constitutional carry bill, and that probably would not have violated the rule about no new bills. But politically speaking, at that 11th hour where we were put on the spot by this AG opinion that came through, we decided to take 3 instead of 7, basically is what it came down to. And so we got 3 bills built into 236 in lieu of action on permitless carry, in part because Senator Brewer and others really decided, you know what, we need to come back and do this in a statewide way next year. And that is something Senator Brewer is committed to, but also because the 3 bills that we got at the end of the day were very good bills. And I can just briefly mention that it was Senator Bostelman's LB 85, which gives folks 4 months notice before their concealed handgun permit expires. Senator Clement's LB 244, which now gives you a 30-day grace period for renewal before you have to reset and do a class and a new application rather than a renewal application. So that could save you hundreds of dollars right there. And probably most importantly, we got Senator Ben Hanson's LB 173, That was first introduced back when I was on the board of the NFOA and a lobbyist for the NFOA as LB 666, believe it or not. And we were finally able to get a version of that bill which addressed this issue in Nebraska law, where a cased firearm could be considered a concealed weapon in violation of the criminal statute on carrying a concealed weapon, which put us in a weird position where we're supposed to have a loose gun flopping around in the car if we don't have a concealed handgun permit. Or, by the way, if it's not a handgun, right? Because only handguns are authorized for a concealed handgun permit holder to go concealed with. So LB 173, the guts of that were ported into LB 236. And now a cased unloaded firearm, so a firearm in a case, either factory packaging or a case originally designed to be a gun case, if it's unloaded, that is not a concealed weapon in Nebraska anymore. And I can tell you, I know firsthand the names of some people whose criminal cases went away because we got this law change. In fact, one of these folks was a lady who was on her way to Cabela's with a disassembled firearm because Cabela's needed to see the firearm to help her buy replacement magazines because she'd lost the magazines. And she got pulled over with a bag-o gun, and she was actually charged with carrying a concealed weapon in that circumstance. But because before there was a conviction, the legislature did away with that act being a crime, the details of her case, it was no longer a crime under our law, that case went away. So we already have people whose liberty has been preserved by this change that we got this year and which is now effective. So little pat on the back for the NFOA there.
Very good. And as far as the notification that the CHP is going to expire in 4 months, Gito 463 says he got his expiration notification recently, so it definitely is working. So that's awesome to hear. I just renewed mine earlier this year, so I'm a ways away from getting that notification myself. So basically, Dick, if I'm hearing you right, what you're telling me is that statewide permitless concealed carry is definitely not dead. It didn't get as far as we had hoped it would. Well, not the statewide, any permitless concealed carry didn't go as far as we had hoped in this session so far, but that doesn't mean that it's over with. And we have a chance again at the beginning of the next the 60-day session to have a bill reintroduced at that point.
That's right. And that'll be a statewide permitless carry bill. And I can tell you part of that is just because of what we experienced last year. The sanctuary county movement was in full swing, both in 2020 and, this year during the session. And I think legislators really started to take note of that map turning green. And the fact that we ultimately ended up with 91 out of the 93 counties that had passed a measure, I think made a lot of the advocates for the right to keep and bear arms in the legislature, I think it made a lot of them realize, we maybe don't have to take a piecemeal approach because almost everybody in the state wants this, right? At least virtually everybody does. And there's a couple places where we'll have to convince some people, but I think that they realized that with the AG's opinion saying the county delegation of this power maybe wasn't constitutional. And again, I'm not sure if I even agree with that as a legal question. And AG's opinion is not like a Supreme Court opinion, right? It isn't a definitive statement of law, but you got to take it pretty serious. And we had exactly 33 votes on the vote card. And we got the AG opinion the day before this is supposed to be on the floor. And we had exactly the number of votes we needed before, and we were pretty sure at least one or two was going to get broke loose by that AG's opinion. So like I say, we kind of had to triage the situation and, like I say, kick 3 instead of go for 7.
And whether we like it or not, that's part of the legislative process is deals have to be made. And there are things that sometimes we don't get the result that we wanted. Sometimes we have to kick that field goal instead of getting that full touchdown, right?
Yeah. And let me emphasize, we didn't give up. We didn't give up anything in principle. Okay. We didn't give up anything we already had. Okay. And so I don't want people to think it's a compromise and, the NFOA is dealing away people's rights or Senator Brewer is dealing away people's rights because we didn't give any. We didn't give an inch coming back in our direction, and we got some ground going in the correct direction. So I do want to emphasize that it's very just about locking in a gain, and we'll come back and keep working to protect people's rights in subsequent sessions.
And you had mentioned the two-way sanctuary county movement. And for those of you that are watching on Facebook, I'm sure you remember earlier this year those maps that kept getting posted, and more counties were turning from gray to yellow and from yellow to green on the map. And for those of you who aren't aware, Dick is the one who was putting in the time. And again, he's a volunteer, so he's not getting paid anything but our appreciation to do that. But Dick was the one that was keeping a list of the counties who had passed resolutions and updating that map when he had time among his other jobs. He was giving us his spare time as well. And so this is the man that we have to thank for helping us bring that info out to all of you. But as far as getting the work done, that was all of you.
Yeah.
Every county of those 91, every single county had someone who took the initiative and approached the county supervisors or county commissioners and the sheriff and said, this is what we want to have happen. We want this at least on the agenda to be discussed. And 91 out of those, out of our 93 counties, 91 times it worked and a resolution was adopted. And that is not that, it's nothing that NFOA did to make it happen. We just helped get the info out. We helped to encourage, and I've been calling us cheerleaders for the movement this whole time, but it was Nebraskans. That's really what, when we say grassroots, that's what we mean, is that Nebraskans pulled together the way that we do and rolled up our sleeves, got to work, and made it happen. And I'm so proud to be in the state that made that happen. Now, real quick, Trish, I want to bring you in here because we have 91 out of 93 counties already that have adopted such a resolution. 2 counties left to go, but we're not giving up, and we have not admitted defeat or accepted defeat on those 2 counties, right?
Correct. Basically, this has been what I would call a strategic pause. As you know, we talk about NFOA being a volunteer organization, and we have been working behind the scenes to basically create something a little bit more, what do I want to call it? A stronger and more strategic approach for dealing with Douglas and Lancaster County. So what my team and I have been doing is we've collected all of the best practices that have happened across all these different counties across our state. And what, when you say we're, they're cheerleaders, it's been a fantastic experience being someone to help facilitate this and provide them information, provide them resources. And so now we have basically a very, very strong game plan that's going to go to an effect. We wanted to wait until after redistricting was done, because those have that has important implications to our future as an organization, and of course our future as a state. And so we will be beginning the work effort again for Douglas and Lancaster County actually very shortly. So we'll be creating formal coalitions, education campaigns, leveraging all the amazing work that so many different Nebraskans came together and put together. And we've captured all that, and we're going to be implementing that very soon.
That's very, very awesome. So again, stay tuned to our social media, our Facebook page. If you want emails and you want to be on the email list for updates, make sure that you are a member. If you haven't been getting emails throughout the summer from NFOA, make sure that you email us at info@nebraskafirearms.org, which is scrolling across the bottom of the screen as we're talking tonight. Make sure that you send us a message so that we know that we need to make sure that you're getting those emails and you can be included. If a lot of you out there are not on Facebook, and I understand that, so that's why we have the YouTube option and the email option, as well as the Facebook option, so that we can reach as many of you as we can, and make the best use of our efforts. And when those things happen across Lancaster and Douglas counties again, we will definitely try to get all the information out to as many of you as we can. And if you want to help, you don't know what to do, those will be the times that we'll try to get that info out as far as what needs to be done and how you can help get it done. So Dick had mentioned redistricting earlier, and you just mentioned it again as far as the redistricting process. So Dick, I'm going to turn this back over to you. If you would just kind of give us the brief overview of what is redistricting, what does that even mean? And then how has it affected us, because this is the year that it had to be done?
So under the United States Constitution, there's a census that happens every 10 years, as you know. And the purpose of that census is really for the apportionment of political representation. And so there's this principle that has been really enshrined in the constitutional law of our country that we call one man, one vote. And that just means that there's not supposed to be districts weighted with more people or fewer people, because that changes how much of a voice you actually have in government, right? And how much your representative has to listen to you. And as most folks know, in Nebraska, we have more people moving to urban areas and being born in urban areas, and fewer people remaining in rural areas. Now, it's not the case that every rural county lost population. A number of them gained population, but they just didn't gain it at the rate that, say, Sarpy County and Lancaster and Douglas did in particular. And so what that means is the lines have to be pushed around on the map in order to reflect who lives where, right? Land doesn't get a vote. Now, the funny thing I like to tell people, the U.S. Senate would be unconstitutional if it wasn't in the Constitution, because it is apportioned by state, right? Every state gets 2 senators, and you can have as few people as Wyoming, or you can have as many people as California, and you still get 2. But that would be illegal for us to do in Nebraska. I've heard political candidates even talk about, oh, we should have a bicameral, and you know, the other house should be apportioned by counties. It's like, nice idea if it were legal, but it's not. And so redistricting, there's a number of different things that get redistricted. It includes judicial districts. It includes University Board of Regents. It includes the Public Service Commission. But really, the major redistricting tasks are the congressional districts and the state legislative districts. Those are the ones that are usually where the devil's in the details. In part, it's the hardest with legislative districts because there's 49 of them, right? There's just more lines to draw on the map. And you have 49 people in that room who all know the lines around their area, right? And a lot of them it's not just an emotional attachment, but if they're running for re-election, they've worked that district before and had success there, and they're nervous about changing anything that could change that success. Now, that pressure has been mitigated some by term limits, right? A lot of folks who are voting on new district maps aren't going to be up for re-election because of term limits. And so that does limit to some extent how attached people are. Although you'll still hear people talking about the sacred shape of their polygon on the map, even though they're going to be term limited out next year. It's kind of hard to understand because those polygons were all different before 10 years ago. And so in any case, the change from rural to urban is going to be reflected in the legislature. It's going to be reflected in the congressional districts. And on the legislative side, there were substantial changes to nearly all the districts, including in Lincoln and Omaha. And the one that I ran for in 2016, District 27, was on West Lincoln. It's very different. You used to have this long tentacle that shot south down into town and then went up northwest and captured Capitol Beach and stuff. And that shape is different, as are a number of other districts in both Lincoln and Omaha. Now, the congressional districts, there were a few changes. Sarpy has been growing at an incredible rate, fastest growth in the state. And so in District 2, the Sarpy line, where Sarpy was split up between 2 districts, changed. Saunders was also added to District 2. That will remain a competitive district, okay? It's not necessarily a lock for anybody. Congressional District 1 got Oto and some of the new Sarpy County population that 2 didn't keep. And then the rural congressional district, District 3, got 3 new counties, Thurston, Burt, and Washington, all along the Missouri River, and they got part of Polk, okay? But I don't think there were huge winners and losers in the congressional district fight. I will tell you, the parameters are a little different between Congress and the legislature. Congressional districts have to be as nearly equal as possible, which means a deviation of 1, like not 1%, 1 person, okay? Legislative districts, there are a lot of things we care about beyond one man, one vote. For example, in the Nebraska Constitution and statutes, it says we're supposed to follow county lines where it's possible to do so. We're supposed to protect them as units to the extent that's possible. Obviously, in Douglas and Lancaster and Sarpy, that's not possible. Out in rural Nebraska, it usually is. Now, what you're going to see, though, is some races where people really have no idea if they're going to get reelected or not. You're going to see some candidates who are in a different district than they thought they were going to be able to file for. And that is going to change some things for the elections next year. It also means, I think, for this conversation, that we have a golden opportunity because there's this uncertainty involved in people running in districts they haven't run in before. And I think they're going to be a lot more apprehensive about doing things that are going to be wildly unpopular in certain segments of the populace and certain segments of the population that gets to vote, right? And so I do think that there's an opportunity to get some things done this year. And in 2022, I think there's going to be continuing interest in Steve Halloran's LB 188, which is his Second Amendment Preservation Act. That would basically just say state and local law enforcement would not be allowed to participate in enforcing federal gun laws that we don't have on the books in our state as well. Okay. And so,
and not only stating that they're not allowed to participate, but there would be punishments imposed for anyone who did take part, correct?
Yes. And the key thing really, though, is that, the federal government doesn't have that much in the way of law enforcement. I mean, they have an FBI and ATF and so on, but there's not that many bodies that they can put out in the field. I mean, New York City has more cops than the federal government has law enforcement agents across all of the agencies within the executive branch. So there's just not that many federal enforcement agents to go around. And so the enforcement of any kind of major sweeping change to gun laws is going to rely on state and local cooperation. And so just withholding that cooperation is an essential part of slowing down progress on bad policies being enacted. Now, Senator Halloran's Second Amendment Preservation Act is stuck in committee right now. I expect that there will be a pull motion on that. I don't know it for sure, but I think it's more likely than not. And that could happen very early in the session. Now, I also mentioned that Senator Brewer has committed to introduce a statewide permitless carry bill, constitutional carry bill. We do not have all the details nailed down on that. We have been told by the governor that he's got some interest in being involved. We hope that means that it will be a bill at the request of the governor. There's a little rubber stamp that goes on the bill, and that lets people know that, hey, if this passes in similar form, then the governor is going to sign it into law. Now that bill, because it's a statewide bill that's really changing gun policy, not just delegating it, that's going to go to Judiciary Committee. It's not going to come to Government Committee. 236 did. We got it out of our committee with 5 votes, and I can tell you the 5th vote was one we didn't expect. Senator Carol Blood gave us that 5th vote. I would not have bet any amount of money on that happening, and I'll give credit where it's due. I'm glad that she cast the vote the way she did, and that's a good thing. That's how we got 236 to the floor ultimately. Senator Brewer's permitless carry bill is very unlikely to get a majority vote in the Judiciary Committee. That committee has some people that are in favor of the right to keep and bear arms, but most of them are very adversarial when it comes to this issue. And they might act like they're interested, but I think a lot of them are pretty much just going to discuss it to death and not want to take action. I think that it's likely to get a late hearing from Chairman Lathrop, and it's likely to have a pull motion in order to get to the floor. With that said, it only takes 25 votes to get a pull motion done. And as I said, we had 33 on the vote card for our previous permitless carry bill, the county level one. So I think we've got the gas in the tank to do it. It's going to be an effort. It's not going to just be an easy phone it in sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a major, Berlin airlift type operation where we've got to get all hands on deck, where we've got to have people calling in, especially for folks that are on the fence, folks that may not always be there when we need them on a bill. We need to let them know that 5 out of 6 of Nebraska's neighbors have statewide permitless carry. The sky has not fallen. Tina Turner has not appeared in her hairdo with Mad Max at the Thunderdome, any of those states. And I will tell you something that's really paradoxical that I would not have predicted, but that I found out in doing some research on this. States that adopt legal permitless carry usually start issuing more permits.
Mhm.
And I would not have guessed that. But Wyoming now issues twice as many permits per year as they did before they allowed lawful permitless concealed carry. And I think the reason for that is that the incentive when you're restricting the right is to make the permit as easy as possible to obtain, right?
Mhm.
However, that limits how well the permit travels, because the more hoops you jump through, the higher the bar, the more bars you're going to clear in other states for reciprocity purposes. And so what happens in states like Wyoming or in South Dakota is they actually have either an enhanced permit program or they just step up the bar for the permit altogether because you don't need it at home in your home state anymore. And now you can get a credential that will travel really well to more states. And so it actually becomes more valuable for people who are going to travel. And let's face it, we're a more mobile society than ever. We all travel sometime or another. So
Yeah, what
I'd
I've
like to add on that, just to chime in my own research, NFOA has been working the constitutional carry, permitless carry initiative right along with all the work that so many people have done. The other part of it is for anyone who teaches concealed carry class, we all know that there are portions of our course that you just sit there and you're like, okay, I have to teach this to you. And the students are wondering why we're teaching it. We're wondering why we're teaching it, when we really want to emphasize the things that really make people feel confident, equipped to navigate the law, to understand their rights, to understand their responsibilities, to understand the skills of situational awareness, de-escalation, conflict avoidance, right? To win the fight you never get into is the only way to win, guaranteed to win a fight. And so what I found too is even in the states where, a lot of concealed carry permit holder instructors are concerned, oh, my business is going to dry up. No, your business is going to change. You're going to be able to focus and target your training to the most effective content, not what has been put in our state statutes. Every time I teach somebody about registering their what is that called? The gun you use to put animals to sleep. What is that called? You give them a shot and they put them to sleep. What is that? Anyway, I'm tired, as you can tell.
It's okay.
But anyway, you have to register it and you have to, register the sale. We have to tell people about snowmobiles and, violations of that statute. There's so many little funny little weird things that we're required to teach that just take up the time away from the things that have substance and have purpose and have meaning. And so we can have far more effective training also at a better cost, right?
Yeah.
So because I have to teach 8 hours of content rather than, 5 hours of focused content, my prices have to be what they're set at. And so we would reduce that barrier to good, effective training and education. And so as someone who teaches as well as advocates for the Second Amendment, my support for permitless carry stands because I think it's actually going to open doors to more training, which is counter to the argument that the anti-Second Amendment movement likes to say is, oh, we just can't have these people running around with guns with no training. No, actual training is going to increase. So the reverse is true.
What we've seen in other states is that, and Trish and I both have a lot of contacts in other state organizations and all across the country. But what we've seen in other states that have gone permitless carry is once that cost barrier is gone and people don't have to spend extra money to take a class and then spend more money on top of that to give to the state to get a little card or piece of paper that says that they now have permission to exercise what is a right in the Constitution.
Yeah.
That's not a sore point with me at all. But once that cost barrier is removed, more people in those states do exercise their right to concealed carry because they can. Yes. Then they realize they get used to having that. And once you begin to concealed carry and you feel that empowerment to be able to protect yourself and those that are with you at the time, once you decide that you're going to cross the state line, which, let's face it, this is Nebraska, almost everybody crosses the state line at some point for any number of reasons. And so your permitless carry doesn't cross the state line with you. If you want to feel that sense of empowerment and that protection when you go into Iowa or Kansas or any of the states that we neighbor, they all recognize our concealed carry permit as valid in their state as well. There's more incentive for the people who never had planned originally on spending that money to go ahead and sign up for that class with Trish or any other instructor, and then obtain that permit so that again they don't have to disarm themselves when they do, like my dad, when my dad goes to town, he's typically crossing into South Dakota when he goes for parts or just for coffee or whatever. So if my dad decided to be a concealed carrier, but he wanted to carry into South Dakota, he would obtain that permit then. And so that's what we see in a lot of the other states that are implementing permitless carry. Is that's the biggest reason why those permit sales go up instead of down.
Yeah.
And yeah, the added benefit is we've got more people who are willing to take the course to get not only the CHP course, but just the basic course on responsible and safe use, right? Once people obtain that firearm, they realize that there's some responsibility attached with this, and they want to learn how to correctly, safely, and responsibly operate it. And those class attendances tend to go up as well. So it's good for everybody, even those who are safety conscious, because a rising tide raises all ships.
Well,
Correct.
and there's the fact that you'll get to teach material that you're passionate about, that you believe in, that isn't just off of a checklist. And then there's just the principle of the thing. And the fact is, I'm a gun lawyer, right? A bunch of my legal practice would go away if we got rid of a bunch of bad gun laws. And guess what? I'd find something else to do in my case. Okay. Now, the good news is with people providing firearms training, you're not going to have to find something apart from firearms training to do. You'll probably get more business because you'll be teaching about the passion stuff that you care about. It's going to come through in your teaching. And by the way, people appreciate it when they are gun owners. They like to give business to people that they know are principled about the right to keep and bear arms. And I can tell you, as an attorney, I've had people come and give me business unrelated to firearms law stuff because they believed in the principles that I work towards when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms. And so I would just encourage, dealers and trainers and all these other people that might be concerned and say, look, this is going to help you in the end to stick with the principle, because we shouldn't have to pay a fee to exercise a constitutional right. And that's just the bottom line.
Amen.
The right to keep and to bear arms is in the Constitution. It would be our natural right, even if it wasn't, but we happen to live in a country where it's written down, and the government's supposed to respect it. And let me tell you something. We have almost 20 million concealed handgun permit holders in the country, and untold number of additional people in our 20 plus constitutional carry states who carry concealed. Carrying concealed in 2021 is the normal way to bear arms. And the fact is, as more states move to a permitless carry model, that can have nationwide consequences ultimately, because it'll become very clear that, hey, this is the normal, typical, mundane way that people bear arms. And that is what the constitutional right is supposed to reach. Not the unusual, crazy stuff, but just everyday sort of innocent behavior that goes along with keeping and bearing arms. And so this isn't just a fight about Nebraska. It's a fight for gun rights in states that aren't going to get a state bill passed, but maybe we can win in courts. And I can tell you, there are court cases that attorneys are trying to find sort of poster children for, to set up that constitutional case about, hey, does the Constitution provide my right to carry, and even to carry concealed as part of that right to keep and bear arms? So really important stuff. One other thing I wanted to mention, I didn't cover it in the legislative changes that we had, but we had a really important change. And you reminded me of it, Trish, when you mentioned the snowmobile thing, because we had a big change that just happened with the Game and Parks regulation, right? And Game and Parks has traditionally restricted the right of people to carry firearms, even defensive firearms, during bow season while they are bow hunting. So if you have a tag that's only for, archery as a means of take, or black powder as means of take, whatever, primitive weapons, you couldn't carry your concealed handgun even though you had a permit. And so now that is going to change. Now, it's still more restrictive than I would like. I'm a radical, I'll admit that, okay? And Senator Erdman's bill that would have just totally forbade game and parks from regulating the carrying of firearms is my preference. However, I'm pleased to say that the Game and Parks Commission did listen, and there is a new rule that they have promulgated and that is on the Secretary of State's website now that allows you to carry a concealable handgun if you have a permit. The barrel has to be shorter than, I think, is either 3.5 inches or 4 inches. And I think that is so that it's not one that's practically useful for hunting and potentially poaching. So they're still more suspicious of those of us who bear arms than they ought to be, but it's a massive improvement in terms of your ability to defend yourself while you're in the field against 2-legged or 4-legged critters.
Yeah.
And
That
as
was a huge benefit. And especially for so many women are getting into hunting, you know, and we're learning and we're getting out there and we're spending time in nature. And then all of a sudden, you know, you learn about bow hunting, which is a whole nother level. And then you realize you're going to be a woman out in the middle of nowhere with nothing but your bow to defend yourself. It really just made me not so interested in bow hunting, but I'm really, really excited about that change because there's so many beautiful places in Nebraska that I'd love to go to and participate in this tradition. And I'll be able to do so in a way that makes me feel comfortable.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing more reports across the state all the time of 4-legged predators as well. And so, I mean, anybody who's getting out and hunting is either seeing themselves the animals or the sign, or we're just hearing the reports of different animals, cougars, wolves being in the area in Nebraska. And so the ability to protect oneself with more than just the bow and the arrow for a potentially deadly predator is very great that now our sportsmen and women have available to them. So we're very happy for that.
Well, and one of the things that I thought was sort of ironic, you know, they were so concerned that if somebody has a handgun with them, they might poach. And again, they moved on this, so we're grateful. But they didn't stop to consider, well, if you know poachers are out there, don't I want to be able to protect myself as a lawful hunter against somebody who's out there engaged in a criminal activity? Like, you're telling me that they're out there, Game and Parks Commission, but I'm just supposed to just have my wits and cunning to protect me, or have to go Rambo with a bow and arrow in a defensive situation. You know what? I taught archery merit badge. I would never want to have to be in a defensive situation with a bow. Okay. And maybe some of you guys are higher speed than me, but I think that the modern technology is the best technology we've got to defend ourselves. And no, that it's an important change. And it does show how much can change just within an administration or within an executive agency through a regulation changing. And frankly, on the federal level, we're seeing that now, right? With pistol braces potentially being reclassified, with other changes that have been pushed through in the current administration that don't require Congress to act. And so this is a positive illustration of that in Nebraska, but we've certainly got some negative ones at the federal level right now.
Exactly. All right. So before we start to wrap things up, we do have a couple comments, questions and comments that I wanted to get to from over on YouTube. Jeff is out there. Two things. First of all, I believe this was regarding the new statewide permitless carry bill that Senator Brewer is going to be introducing. Jeff wants to know if the new bill will include preemption language. And I don't know if that's even possible to include in the same bill or if that would have to be separate. So can you answer that one for us, Dick?
We're working on it. It is a relevant topic to this bill, because really the question is, would cities still have the power under their municipal powers granted to them by the legislature to regulate the carrying of firearms in town? Currently, as everybody probably knows, we have partial preemption, where if you're a permit holder, restrictions on your rights are preempted, because once the state grants you a power, the locals can't take it away. But the locals, and in particular, we think about Lincoln and Omaha, do have additional restrictions that apply to everybody who's not a permit holder, including handgun registration in Omaha, including transport restrictions in Omaha. And then in Lincoln, we have sort of a backdoor registration requirement, where it's a transaction report anytime you have a firearm other than a sporting rifle or shotgun being transferred in the city of Lincoln. That's supposed to be reported to the Department of Public Safety, which is the bureaucracy that houses the police department. So The answer is I'm not sure. I think that we probably will include that in the initial draft, but that's above my pay grade. That's going to be a decision that's made by really the senators as they're gauging what it's possible to achieve. I will tell you, the Concealed Handgun Permit Act did not originally have preemption language in it, and we had to go back and add that preemption, the partial preemption later. Of course, it's good to do as much as we can do when we can do it. I do think it's a great opportunity in 2022, but we're just going to have to see. Now, I will tell you some of the contours of this law. I think that what we're going to propose is keeping the same rules that we have for concealed handgun permit holders for permitless carry. So, for example, a duty to inform when you encounter law enforcement. Certainly, we wouldn't want to have a perverse situation where a permit holder has less rights than someone without a permit. And also uniformity, I think, is just much safer and easier to comply with for members of the public. And it's also a lot easier to understand for police officers who are in a situation on the side of a highway or whatever. And again, surprises in a law enforcement encounter, when it comes to surprise about a gun, we don't like those, right? And so if we can minimize, any kind of danger that can come from somebody feeling unsafe in that encounter, we want to do that because obviously most of the senators that are going to vote for a bill like this are very passionate about supporting law enforcement as well. And I think you'll find that most law enforcement actually favor this, especially once we talk to them about how it would work, what it means, the fact that we're not talking about felons, we're not talking about people who are otherwise prohibited from having firearms. All those people, if they're carrying a gun, that's still actionable. And frankly, we have a process for people who are dangerously mentally ill. We have a process for people who have violated the law in a serious way where their civil rights are going to be impacted. We don't need to presume that everybody's going to be a lawbreaker and therefore should be prohibited by default from being able to carry concealed. So,
right. We want to preserve the concept that we are all innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly right.
Exactly. Okay. One other question that Jeff had out there. How do legislators decide what to submit as far as what bill to submit? He contacted a couple with requests, heard from one, but not the other. So real quick, and I know you're not a senator, Dick, but you've worked with a lot of them. So how does a senator decide which bills to submit and which ones won't go anywhere?
Well, I'll tell you, part of it is how noisy constituents are. And if a senator has just got ringing in his ears from how much he's heard about a particular issue, he's very likely to either introduce or co-sponsor or be involved in the passage of legislation on that topic, or an opposing legislation, if that's what the word was that he was getting from his constituents. And sometimes it's just something that a senator has particular knowledge of because of their profession outside of the legislature. They might focus on things they know about. For example, Senator Brewer, he's a long period of service in the United States military, disabled veteran, a retired Army officer. And so he works on veterans issues. He's a Native American. He works on issues pertaining to Native Americans a lot because he's got the base of knowledge in those topics to address it. But senators also introduce bills based on what they've learned in the legislature. And they might learn something new about the law. It happens all the time. And they say, that just sticks in my craw. I just can't believe that's the law and I'm going to change it or I'm going to try to. And so that's how they might be inspired to do it. Another way they might be inspired to do it is if a lobbyist walks in and hands them a bill and gives them a really good pitch about why this is a good bill and why it aligns with your principles, Senator. And, lobbyists do get a bad rap, and often that's for good reason. But I'll tell you the reason that lobbyists are effective is because they are valuable resources for information for senators. Senators come in, and guess what? None of them are experts in everything. In fact, some of them aren't experts in anything. Don't tell them I said that. But having a lobbyist come in and get you coached up where you can sound like you half know what you're talking about if words come out of your mouth on a particular topic is extremely valuable to senators. And so I would say that, and just the fact that lobbyists are, as a rule, very good relationship builders, that is the reason that lobbyists are so effective. And often that includes getting bills introduced. Now, if a lobbyist comes knocking, though, usually they're going to have to offer a senator sort of concierge service. Hey, I'll help you write your opening statement. Hey, I will whip votes for you, and make a bunch of contacts to get you co-sponsors. Hey, I think I can find you a priority designation where you won't have to burn yours on this. So there are things that lobbyists have the expertise to be able to promise that a lot of times a guy walking in off the street just doesn't know how to do or doesn't know that he could do, right? And so those are the different ways that a bill comes into the head of a senator, and he gets the idea or she gets the idea that, hey, maybe I'm going to turn this into a bill that goes in the clerk's basket in those first 10 days of the session. But there's also just the practical limitations, right? We've only got either a 60-day or a 90-day session, and politics is very much the art of the possible. And so, a senator knows introducing a bill, he's at least going to have to go give a speech, right? Going to have to go give an introduction in a committee hearing. Now, if it dies a short and undignified death in committee, that'll be it, right? But to get a bill to the finish line, you're going to have to do a bunch of work, especially if it's any kind of a controversial bill that can't go on what we call consent calendar, which is for really just sort of tweaks to laws that everybody agrees with, that there just aren't even on controversial topics. And so senators usually are not going to give themselves a bunch of work on the front end, knowing that they can't get anything for most of those out of the back end. So that's going to be the limitation, is just how possible is it for me to actually succeed in this project. So,
okay. So if I'm hearing correctly, then, and you can tell me if you agree with this, but when it comes to topics like the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which would be a statewide law, or the statewide permitless concealed carry bill that has yet to be introduced, but we do have a commitment for that. If Nebraskans want to make these things happen, then they should start to contact their own district senator right away. And then, but also, we know that that LB 188, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, that is in, is that Judicial Committee or is that Government Committee?
It's a government committee.
Okay, so find out again, and you can go to what's the website to get to the Nebraska Legislature?
It's just nebraskalegislature.gov.
So nebraskalegislature.gov. There's a link on the side for standing committees. And you should learn who is in the government committee and contact all of those senators. Even if they're not your senator, you should let them know that you want this to happen as a Nebraskan.
And the other thing is, again, we're likely to have to do a pull motion on that bill. So also contact your own senator at some point, and you might wait to do that until the beginning of the session, but let them know, hey, I really want you to support Senator Halloran's bill coming out of committee. We understand there's a log jam, and we want you to help break up that log jam.
Right.
Now, I will say something that people can do right now. We're drafting this concealed carry bill, and you could call your senator up or send them an email right now and say, hey, I'd like you to work with Senator Brewer on getting a constitutional carry bill or permitless carry bill into shape where you can support it. Go do the work to get to a point where you can support it, because there's an election next year, maybe not for you, but for other people I'll be voting for. And I'm a voter who looks really hard at how people vote on my rights, especially this right. And so
what's the old saying? The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So Nebraska, are you listening? Start squeaking. The more squeaky wheels we can get contacting our senators, the more likely that those senators are willing to grease those squeaky wheels. So let them know that you're not happy with the way things are, that you want these bills to be either pulled out of committee and ultimately passed, and that you expect them to do their job as your representation for your district. Right? That's how they got voted in, because they represent the people where you live. And so let's make sure that all of our senators know that as Nebraskans, these are issues that we're not willing to bend on. We need this done. We want this done. The Constitution says that we shouldn't have to do this process, but if this is the way it's going to be, then by golly, let's make it happen.
Yeah. Got to be vigilant. Got to stay in the fight.
Yep. So. And one phone call, one email is great, but where one is great, 10 calls are even greater. If your senator doesn't know who you are and doesn't ultimately potentially maybe dread hearing that you're on the phone again because you want to just stress this to them, that's okay. It's okay, because we don't want to be annoying to the fact that they go the other way and they're unwilling to work with us, but we want them to know who we are. We need them to understand that we are here. We're Nebraskans, we're voters, and we need them to again, we need them to work together to pass these laws.
And I would emphasize that let's try to assume good faith. Okay. Even if
Yes.
somebody is not voted in the way that you thought was best before, give them the opportunity to agree with you. Okay. Present the pitch as, hey, I know that you take your job as a senator seriously, and I wanted to let you know where I'm at on this. And I hope that you can find your way to supporting this bill. And if I can answer questions about why I think it's important and why somebody in your district cares, I'd love to be a sounding board for, I mean, offer that olive branch. And it's the old saying about honey versus vinegar, right? And what attracts flies. And it's just give people the chance to agree with you.
Right. And when I said that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, I didn't mean to be combative.
Yeah,
right. I definitely don't mean to call up and yell at your senator. Please don't do that. Nobody's going to work with you if you come across combative. But the more people who call or write or email or do all three or meet in person, and just give that encouragement and express that expectation, then the better our chances will be.
Yeah, just persistent, civil, informative engagement.
And speak to people the way that you would expect them to speak to you if they're trying to convince you to do what they want. That's maybe the best way to say that. And I think that when we get a little bit closer to the time that these bills will be introduced and heard in some committees, I think we can do another town hall where we go back over and just kind of, again, I don't think we can do this maybe too often throughout the year, but I don't think that once a year is too often to just discuss the right ways to contact our senators, whether it's state or federal representation, and just the ways to contact them, the things to say, the things to not say, so that we do look like we are constituents who are worth listening to.
Yeah.
So we'll revisit that when the time comes. I think that
one more question on there from Cam. He's asking about what the drafting timeline will look like for the constitutional carry bill. The answer on that is it's not going to be final till it goes into the clerk's basket. Okay. Until we introduce it. So we will not be circulating a draft for, sort of a general audience until that time. Now we will be walking around, and certainly Senator Brewer will be walking around talking to potential co-sponsors. In some of those cases, he may share an earlier draft with them if they have questions or they want to be involved in crafting a certain part of it that they think that they need to have some input on. But that won't be published in final form or in introduced form until January. So,
okay. So great question, Cam. All right. Real quick, if anybody has any other questions, we're about to wrap up. So last call for those questions, but I see Cam has another one up here. And we've talked about this again, but Dick, you say these things so much more eloquently than I can. So another question from Cam. So as Nebraskans, what can we do? So let's kind of sum things up. If we don't have any other questions, we'll wrap up after this one. As Nebraskans, what can we do now, the rest of 2021?
Well, I mentioned there you can lead a little bit by asking people to help Senator Brewer prepare for the permitless carry fight. I think part of it is maybe acquainting yourself with where you're at now. You might be in a different district. You might have a new opportunity to get acquainted with a senator that you were not previously represented by. And now let me explain something just on that point very briefly. It's not like the senators have a whole new value set because their polygon on the map got drawn differently, okay? And back in 2011, District 49 started out in western Nebraska, okay? And Leroy Loudon, a rancher out there, was the senator. And then his district got moved to Sarpy County. And so everybody was wondering why the senator whose district was in Sarpy County introduced the Black-tailed Prairie Dog Act and all this other ranch stuff, right? But it's because senators are elected for a term. They're going to represent their constituency and the values that they were sent there with, regardless of what the polygon on the map looks like. But if they're up for re-election, they better care a little bit about that polygon and who their new constituency is, because that's going to be the population that decides if they stay in office. So I think right now, get caught up on who is, now representing the place where you live. and also get caught up on who's going to be in the contest. Because again, there's a lot of uncertainty in this next election cycle as people's districts look different and they're campaigning in places they haven't necessarily had to campaign before. They might have lost a stronghold that had really put them over the top in the last one. So realize that a lot of them are going to be hungrier for constituent contact and take less for granted. And so just take advantage of that.
Very awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple things. Having worked recently with so many different other grassroots organizations, totally concur with everything that Dick said. And adding to that, we're Nebraskans, right? But we live in districts, we live in counties, we live in cities. But what happens in Lincoln, what happens in Omaha, what happens out in Kearney and Scottsbluff and Norfolk and the entirety of the state matters to all of us. You know, we're one state, we're one community, we're one family. And so one of the things that I am really keen on is really examining what's also happening outside of my specific district, what's happening outside of my specific city, because there are fantastic candidates that represent Nebraskan values who are going to be running for office or running for reelection. And if we can support our current local folks and we have some extra, well, then let's give it to them, right? Because one of the challenges that we face in our unicameral is the composition, and we could help place better equipped, smarter people into office if we support their campaigns as well. So even though they may be outside of my district, I can volunteer for them. I can donate my time. I can donate my money. I can educate my friends in that district about that particular candidate or about that particular elected official. And this is everything from school boards, every single level of government. You know, we have some amazing county commissioners who have done an exceptional job in our community, and we should definitely, show them our appreciation for all their hard work and taking a stand and passing sanctuary county resolutions. And so that's also something that every Nebraskan can do, is to get outside of our own circle and look where else we can help to make Nebraska values stay strong.
Right. It's not enough to send a strong candidate from your own district, because that might be the only strong candidate for that issue in the whole unicameral, and they won't get any bills passed without any kind of help. So we need to make sure we have enough senators in the entire unicameral to lend the support and give the votes needed to pass these laws that we want to see, or these bills that we want to see passed into law. So very, very good point. And also, if I can build on that, you have the district where you live, but you may work in a different congressional district or legislative district. And so you have a vested interest in two different legislative districts, and you have good reason to contact the senators for those two districts. If you've got land in a different district yet, if you've got family in a different district like I do, maybe you live in Valentine, but you've got a kid going to school in Peru or Curtis. These are all reasons why you have a vested interest in more than one district across the state. And so don't think that just because you're contacting a senator who you don't get to vote for, that you don't have a voice, because as Nebraskans, we're all neighbors, right? And coming from Kippaha County like I did, I mean, I grew up with the true understanding of what that word means, neighbor. We all work together, and so we can all work together for all of these topics, just like we saw Nebraskans work together for the 2A sanctuary counties. Y'all, nothing has happened across the state the way it happened across the country in any other state the way it has happened in our state. And if we can make that happen the way that we did, then we can make anything happen. We just have to pull together, and that comes from knowing how to best direct the efforts, and we will do our best. You have our word. As the organization, NFOA will do our best to get that info out to you so you can help direct those efforts the way that they need to do. And again, we're not done. 91 out of 93 counties is not 93 out of 93. And so we may have our work cut out for us, but now that we've had a breather, it's about time to go back into the work on that as well. So
Yeah. Well, and everybody should be really proud of, I think, what NFOA has done so far and what the organization has the potential to do in the not too distant future. You know, when this organization started, I wasn't with it that far back, but it's not that ancient of an organization. And this is something where thousands of Nebraskans have come together on an issue. And, you know, we were talking earlier about grassroots. A lot of times people try to simulate grassroots. It's called astroturfing, right? Where we try to, somebody might try to plant a couple of commenters in a public hearing so it looks like there's popular support. But what was happening in these counties last year and this year, NFOA was largely finding out about it after it happened in many cases, right? Oh, it's already on the agenda. Oh, they've already passed it. You know, there were some cases where we didn't find out for months because it was a little county and it didn't make any newspaper or anything. And on the one hand, that made our map have to be updated more often unexpectedly, which is a good problem to have.
right.
But it also just proves how decentralized this was. It wasn't just some wonk in a cubicle somewhere trying to direct traffic through all these counties. These are people on the ground who went and talked to folks that they knew and built relationships. And, you know, I think that paves the way for some of those people to run for their own office in the future. And starting at those local levels can help. Of course, there's a lot of things you can do for good at the local level, but it can also then help you level up later if you want to come to legislature or run for some other higher office, because it shows that you've got this track record of working hard, being able to work with others, and being able to win. And so do consider if your participation get to that level. And of course, you can contact one of us to talk about what that might take. And there's some great seminars out there that people can take, workshops on how to conduct an election campaign. And so just something to consider as well, because, you know, Nebraska is a pretty small state when it comes to population. And so that means people who don't necessarily like politics may have to be involved in it and run for things. And by the way, those are my favorite kind of politicians, the ones who aren't so enamored with politics, right?
You're here. And if 2020 and 2021 have taught us anything about government, it is that local government has far more power than most of us ever realized. And if you want to get involved, there's no limit to what you can't accomplish within your local government. And this trickles uphill. It really does. So once we accomplish things locally, we can move to county, state, and federal levels from there. So again, I just want to encourage everybody to do what you can. If you want to find out from us any info, then we are available. Again, info@nebraskafirearms.org. So yeah, that's great stuff. Dick, I want to thank you very much for taking time and abusing your voice the way that you have for us tonight. We appreciate it. And again, I know I've told you this privately, but we are very grateful, and I want to say this on behalf of Trish and the rest of NFOA as well. We're so grateful for all the help that you have given us, especially with keeping up with the 2A sanctuary county resolutions, keeping your list, compiling copies of the resolutions, getting the map updated. And I know that you stayed up late a lot of nights, burning some midnight oil to get all of this done for us. So we very much appreciate it. And again, on behalf of NFOA Nebraska, thank you for making the efforts that Dick has done and that Trish and I did as far as helping to spread the word, and the rest of our board and our membership. Thank you for pulling together, showing the rest of the country what it means to be Nebraskans, right? To pull together, to be neighbors. So I don't see any other questions. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Again, if I'm going to throw it out one more time, info@nebraskafirearms.org, or you could just go to our website at nebraskafirearms.org and you can get to the info link, but you can, or the email link, but you can also join us. And again, I'm not asking for anybody's donations, but if anybody wants to help us out, we are not going to turn that down. And I want to just make sure that everybody understands that as well. But it is free to join. It's free to be a member. And it'll never change. That is actually in our bylaws, so you have our word. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us tonight. Those of you who are commenting out there in the live chat, Facebook and YouTube both, we appreciate those comments, those questions. again, if you're watching this on the replay, help us share this. And even if you're watching it live, help us share this. Hit the share button. YouTube and Facebook both have a share button, so you can send this out to everybody in your friend list. Either way, you can send this out to everybody in your email address book if you want to. And if people have more questions, we would love to see those comments on the videos down below in the comment section after the fact. We will do our best to field any questions in there, but if you want a more rapid answer, then send that email off, info@nebraskafirearms.org. Nebraska, Trish, Dick, thank you very much. You've all been amazing, and we're going to sign it off. Everybody have a good night.
Good
Thanks a
night,
lot.
everyone.